Just going online here. How do you? I think I must always will have that. This is on. Okay. Last sip here. Cocoa juice. Matrikcha Mangalam Mangalam Bhakta Brindevyo Sarvalokaya Mangalam Om Stapakaya Dharmasya Sarvadharma Sarūpiṇī Avatar Varishtaya Ramakrishna Te Namaha Om Sarashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Majjamam Ashmarachara Prayantam Bande Gurum Paramparam Om Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Deva Maheshwara Guru Deva Param Brahman Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Jai Sri Sri Guru Maharaji Ki Jai Sara Mahamai Ki Jai Om Sri Ganesha Sharda Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om Tat Sat Jai Ma Jai Ma. Happy New Year officially. Picking up, we're continuing our discussions on the Kālī Sahasranāma, the 1,000 names of Kālī. And last week, we dealt with 2 names in verse somewhere. You remember what we talked about? Bhagavati. We talked about Bhagavati, Bhagavati, and Anuragini. These 2, right? So now we will start. I lost my. So in we're the name 244 in verse 32, for those who are keeping track at home. Paramānandarūpā cha Ciddānanda-Svarūpiṇī Sarvānanda-Mayī Nitya Sarvānanda-Svarūpiṇī. So this is a very nice little collection of names. And we have to, this verse, this cluster of names comes between the last cluster of names we talked about, and we gave a very, tries to justify an interpretation that's dealing with the Kundalini and Ida and Pingala and Sahasrānāma to give that type of context. And then you have this group of names that just describing all blissful form of bliss and consciousness. And then the next group of names will again include the Devi's forms in different chakras. So the fact it's stuck in here, we have to put these names in the context of also one way to interpret them is within the chakras and Kundalini and the Sahasrānāma type of experience. So we'll maybe go back to those. So the first name, Paramānanda, Paramānandarūpā. And so actually in this little cluster of names, there's Paramānanda-Rūpā, Ciddānanda-Svarūpā. Sarūpiṇī is the feminine, right? And then there's also Sarvānanda-Mayī. And then Sarvānanda-Svarūpiṇī. So the three endings, Rūpa, Svarūpa, and Mayī. So they're not the same. They're related, but they're not the same. Rūpa, people know Rūpa means form, right? That's a very general, like Nama Rupa, name and form. We have that type of stuff. Rupa also means beauty. It means many things, but form is a good general definition. So when you say something like when Ananda-Rūpā, Paramānanda-Rūpā, whatever we decide Paramananda is, the Rūpa means is like that's her she is that thing, right? She here is a feminine name. She is that thing, and then Svarūpa is like the essential nature of something. Svarūpa is your own, or your own, her own. Its own essential nature, its own nature. Swa means oneself or one's own, right? And then Mayī means, what does Mayī mean? Mayī, like Ananda-Mayī, this similar type of thing. So we often translate it as full, right? But we'll get to that name. We'll flesh it out. But these three are interesting because they're showing three different ways or four different ways of thinking about the names in general. We've mentioned this. We keep going back to this. Is like what are these names describing? They're just, some of the names are very obvious, like she who holds a sword, she who sticks her tongue out, she who is black in color, she who lives in the cremation ground. These are describing the iconographic description details of Kālī specifically. Then there's other names like she who is angry, or she who is loving, or she who is beautiful, she who is kindness, or she who is kind, right? So then it becomes like, these are her qualities. She is the most kind, or she who is here says she who is blissful. So she who is blissful, or she who is the most blissful, she who is the supreme bliss, right? Or it could be, so I said when we think of when her as an object, even the supreme object, these are her qualities. Another way of describing, rather than her qualities like her gunas, she is those things. We've discussed this already, so I'm just backing up because I'm how I'm going to interpret these names. She's the things themselves. So like she's not angry, she's anger. She's not beautiful, she's beauty. She's the thing itself, right? In our dualistic language, we attribute the thing that she is to her, right? Because Swami Vivekananda says this, makes a statement that the Ishta Devata is an attempt to make the subject an object, objectify the subject, right? So she is consciousness. These names will say, one of it, like Svarūpa, she's Ciddānanda-Svarūpā. She's consciousness itself, right? But how do we think of consciousness itself as not something we worship, not someone we worship, not an object of meditation? So when you make an object of meditation, then it becomes, these are her. She's the one. She's conscious, right? She's beautiful, and she is those things, because the play on that is there. Please excuse me, a sip of coffee, tea. So Paramānanda-Rūpā, we'll start with that. Paramānanda. So Parama means highest. That's the most common thing, best or highest, right? Paramānanda, the highest. Paradesha, paradise, the greatest land, the highest idea, right? Paramānanda. Para also means highest, it means greatest, it means supreme. Of course, these are mostly the same thing. It means transcendental, right? It means, and so it also means other. That what you think, it's not something. Para means like in the Bhagavatam. It took a little while, many years ago, before we understood the use of this term, right? When Prahlad is critiquing Hiranyakashipu's views. And he says his views, one of the mistakes of the demonic view is that we consider, to consider para, the other. Meaning the other means somebody else's benefit different than your benefit. Like when you see another, you consider them to be the competition. So even another person is considered para. Also para in context in the Bhagavatam also means enemy. So just by usage, right? So you have your friend, right, and the other. Those who are with us and those who are, we have this language in politics also, who are with us and those who are against us, those who are in our group and those who are outside of our group, which becomes the other itself makes them an enemy. So obviously Paramānanda does not mean the blissful enemy or something like that, right? But I'm just showing this idea of word other, by para means other, when we think of whatever Ananda means, right? So say Paramananda means the highest, the greatest, the supreme, the most awesome of the Anandas, right? But it also could mean whatever we think Ananda is, it's not that. It's different than we usually think, right? So it's other than what we think. It's not what we usually think. So we have to think, what is Ananda? Ananda means, okay, we translate Ananda, the most common thing is bliss, right? And so but also we use this word, bliss without any real thinking. So what do we mean by bliss? Usually bliss is like, I don't know, really happy? I don't know. I mean, I don't know what, almost like silly happy almost. I mean, we use it very in spiritual life, we use it extremely uncarefully, right? It's like, oh, he's so blissful, or she's, sometimes it just means like space, combination between spacey, ungrounded, happy, idealistic. You can put all the things together and that's a blissful, with ignorance is bliss type thing, right? So that's can't be what it means here. So bliss. I'm remembering. I couldn't access the verse or the quote from something I read in high school by Paramahansa Yogananda, and he said that Ananda is not happiness, right? By his definition, right? And so it's not this not even like really. So you can say Paramananda, but Ananda sometimes in the scriptures, in the language, Ananda means happiness, right? Oh, Kupanand, I'm very happy. I'm very I'm very happy you came. Kupanand, I'm very happy. So in common language, Ananda means happiness, right? But him saying, but when the scriptures are when Ananda is being described as like the goal of life or the nature of the soul or the effect of union with God or supreme devotion as like a highest possible goal or highest possible experience, it doesn't just mean happiness, right? But it does mean happiness. That's the problem. We'll show it. It does mean happiness, but it's used a little differently. So specifically, it's not happiness as opposed to suffering. So that's a different thing. And the dichotomy we have sukha and dukkha, and so dukkha means suffering, right? And so the opposite of suffering is not happiness. Really, it's like I guess maybe you could say pleasure. That's really hard because sukha. People here may know Hindi and Sanskrit better. I can guarantee that most people here, even though I don't know, you at least knows at least one person knows Hindi better. Sukha means happiness. It means pleasure. Yeah, but Ananda is not just like I eat something tasty and that's pleasure, or I get my way and I become satisfied or happy or and the opposite of that is when I don't get it, I get suffering. So it's always described something different. But I'm the language is because we use this extreme other transcendental language to describe Ananda, that I think we've separated our experiences of pleasure to this imagined goal. And in recently reading some book, when Swami brought up this point to the Titanium Punishad, which we just now looked up, to describe kind of like in the Titanium Punishad, I shall read it. I won't read the verse. We decided not to read the verses themselves because it's very difficult to get the point. I'll just give the gist of it. It's basically describing that we have human beings. You can imagine a human being has a certain one really wonderful experience of happiness is, or pleasure experience. And he's described that, imagine that as like one unit of Ananda, right? Whatever a human's possible of getting. This is a archaic way of describing, right? Then it says, then above that it's a very strange category. We don't have this category. Human Gandharva, right? Then there's celestial. Above that is celestial Gandharva. Gandharvas are we talked about the Gandharvas in previous talk, right? A semi-divine heavenly musician, right? What's a human Gandharva? It's interesting. We were thinking maybe a rock star or something. I guess theoretically rock stars experience potentially and experientially way more pleasure than Swamis do or should. But for sure, so maybe it's that. Maybe musicians in the ancient world had the same reputation. Maybe that's the case. Anyway, this is a category I don't fully know. So if you have a human Gandharva, right? And it says that 100 times more pleasure than a human being is a human Gandharva. They're the type of pleasure, the amount of pleasure, or the quality of pleasure that they can experience. So we can't even imagine it. I can't imagine what a rock star can experience, for instance, right? And then the celestial Gandharva, a heavenly Gandharva of the actual Gandharva Loka, whatever Gandharva Loka is, we've lost consciousness of that realm, except in a few texts like this. Right, that's 100 times greater than the human Gandharva, right? Then 100 times more pleasure or more bliss or more ecstasy or however we imagine it, 100 times greater than that it's what's experienced in the ancestral realm, the Pitraloka, right? So we hope that's the case. That we hope our ancestors, wherever they are experiencing 400 times more bliss than they than the because in this world it's but also you think the pleasure in this world is not, it's mixed, right? And so you can see, so each one higher and higher and higher. So then the Karma Devas, these are higher category of Deva, 100 times more than that. 100 times more than that is what Indra experiences, the king of the gods, right? So we can't imagine what the king, what the heavenly pleasure is, not just heaven, but the king of heaven, what he's experienced. 100 times greater than that, it says, is what Brihaspati experiences. 100 times greater than that, what Prajapati experiences. 100 times greater than that is what Brahma experiences, Lord Brahma. So there's a gradation of ananda, of pleasure, right? And so each is felt 100 times next order. So Paramānanda is the highest, most level. So even Brahma, maybe he's in the, of course, can't exactly say that Pitraloka and Gandharva Loka and Brihaspati and Prajapati and Brahma are material, but in this way they're still in the material. It's like that extreme amount of ananda, right? This verse is, I believe, this name is saying that this is greater than that, right? We can't even imagine. We can't even imagine what this is. We can't imagine what a Gandharva experiences, 10,000 times greater bliss, or There's a very interesting verse in the Katha when Nachiketa, sorry, it's not fresh in my mind, right? Nachiketa goes to Lord Yama and asks what's the meaning of life, and what's real, what survives death, he wants the real answer, right? And so the first thing it says is choose something different, right? No, I want this. No, choose anything different, right? This supreme thing, don't ask about that, right? You're a little boy. And then he says, choose, if you allow me, I shall give you, it's like a heavenly body and a heavenly world with heavenly enjoyments, right? Not only we cannot even imagine, but we'll give you the body by which you can appreciate their sweetness. This body, what can we do? We can't enjoy anything, right? You eat too much. You finally find an ice cream you like. You eat too much of it, you get sick. If it's too warm, it melts. It's not tasty anymore. It's like we can't even enjoy properly any material enjoyment. The body is actually, this is one of the statements in the Bhagavatam also, that this body is not really meant for much. We can't get much enjoyment out of the body, right? So the type of enjoyments possible in the heavenly realms, as per Yama's description or temptation, right, is 1,000 times greater. It said, I'll give you the type of body where you can taste that type of pleasure. Right? No. After seeing your face, this is interesting. He says, remember, who is he talking? He's looking in the face of death. Seeing your face, how can I be interested in such things? Of course, many of us thinking about death, we want to go to such a place. We sometimes superimpose that type of stuff. But thinking that I want to know will it end? Is that really the highest? It's because it's way greater, way sweeter, way tastier, way than human pleasure, right? Is that really the goal, right? So he says, I want the highest, the highest thing. So perhaps Paramananda is not just the greatest in the list, but something inconceivably completely other. If you take all the type of pleasure, maybe it's the highest possible pleasure, maybe it's entirely different category altogether. Right. In our coffee before starting, we were looking at the Lita Sahasranāma. The same name is there in Lita Sahasranāma, in case you're interested. Name 252. It's there. Paramānanda. And in the commentary, Mitch is very simple point is that this is the Paramānanda, because that's interesting. The name right before, I noticed the name right before, right, is Chinmayi. Right, she who is consciousness. The name in the Lita Sahasranāma, and the name after this also says Ciddānanda. So it's interesting that these two are connected. I think very important that this Anandami mentioned. This is the supreme bliss is the supreme consciousness. Ciddānanda-Svarūpiṇī. It's one of the next name that's coming. Right. So it's, how do you say, the supreme consciousness? When that highest pure awareness, the way the Sahasranāma's commentary mentions it, the highest awareness is reached, then sorrow disappears. One goes beyond sorrow, right? So it's not like the pleasure opposite of sorrow. It's in a different, when consciousness is attained, pure consciousness, pure awareness is contained, the highest awareness is attained, sorrow, sukha, dukkha disappear. That is ananda. The pleasure and pain are in the senses, pleasure and pain in the mind, but ananda is not those things. Ananda is the nature of consciousness itself. The next name, Ciddānanda, consciousness and bliss. This Paramānanda will come throughout the Upanishads, throughout the scriptures, and often it's described that this is the experience. Supreme bliss is attained or experienced or realized, right? It's synonymous with liberation. Liberation is the attainment of the highest. Another word that's used in the Bhagavatam is paramgati, the highest goal, right? Another one of the great para names, right? Paragati, Paramananda, para bhakti, para, use all these, the highest possible thing, is also paragati, the highest aspirational goal, what we should be seeking. Our Guruji used to say that actually, not only what we should be seeking, it's actually what we're thinking, what we're seeking. Right? Our Guru used to say that actually what we really seek, we want, what is it, what we really want? We want unchanging, we want infinite pleasure, infinite happiness, right? And unending happiness, right? And what we seek it in what? We seek it in what we can. We get it where we can, right? At the human level, way 10,000 times, 100,000 times less than Gandharva level, perhaps, right? We seek it in temporary objects, right? And in finite objects. So as a result, we get happiness, some happiness, but we get temporary happiness, and we also get finite happiness, right? And so I mentioned to me this is one of the. It's been, as the years go by, the tenor and voice and personality of the Guru fades. It happens, right? But this is one thing I remember very clearly, right? It's like we seek permanent happiness in impermanent objects. We seek infinite happiness in finite objects. He says, if you seek something permanent value in an impermanent object, or infinite value in an infinite object, what will happen? You will become frustrated, guaranteed, right? That's like that. You're bound to be frustrated. This is not. You're bound to be frustrated by logic, right? You're bound to be frustrated, and so the classic thing is, here we are. I mean, I don't know about you. I don't want to impose my frustration on other people, but I'm not saying you don't look, at least none of you look frustrated. But I'm a little bit frustrated. Right? We're trying to find happiness, and so what we're looking for is the highest. We're looking not just Ananda, we're looking the real quality of Ananda. Ananda is Paramānanda. In case you're looking for Ananda, he's behind you the whole time. The back of the temple. Hidden in plain sight. Yeah, hidden in plain sight. Yes, he's right there the whole time. Paramānanda. So this name Paramānanda. So we could say we're seeking supreme, the highest happiness. Unchanging, infinite. Of course, unchanging, infinite, these are just terms. We don't even know it. We can't think of anything unchanging and infinite, but there is something unchanging and infinite. She is that. But here it doesn't say Paramānanda. It means, of course, we have a guru, we have a brother disciple named Swami Paramānanda, very appropriately named, a true Vedantic scholar, and somebody who is after and perhaps experiencing some level of Paramānanda. But here is Paramānanda-Rūpā, and if this is turned into a mantra, Om Paramānanda-Rūpā Yue Namaha. That's how we say. We bow to she, who is Paramānanda-Rūpā, whose form or whose nature or whose essence or whose I don't know. The one who is the Supreme Bliss. So it's not what we're after. I mean, if you want to know it's not only what we're after, it's also who we're after. Right? So we could say, oh, she is Paramananda. She is that. Right? The next name, you can also say she's Paramānanda-Svarūpā. Here it doesn't say that. The next name says something like that, right? Which means that she is the Supreme Bliss, not only that she is the Supreme Bliss, and if you want to seek it in her, and she's the one we're looking for, right? But she is bliss itself. So she is the thing itself. So the next name we'll circle back. Ciddānanda-Svarūpiṇī. So Paramananda, Supreme Bliss, Ciddānanda, another quality of Ananda. Here is Chinmayi, like we say Satchitananda, the same root, Chit, Chin, Chaitanya, Chit, all these names are a similar name, means consciousness, awareness. So she is, that her nature is both, you could say she's both consciousness and bliss. You can also say she's blissful consciousness. There's sometime in some language we find that in English translation, that type of description. She's consciousness, she's the expression of, anyway, so like this. Chinmayi. So I mentioned in the name before this in the Nitya Sahasranāma, Chinmayi, she was consciousness. And also there's, what is that hymn? And we have the hymn by Shankaracharya, that Ciddānanda-Rūpam Shivoham Shivoham. Right, that's a Nirvanastakam, I think, right? Or Astak, not, it's 6 verses, I think, right? Nirvana, 8 verses, right? This, we've memorized it, but a long time ago. It's not, theoretically it's in my head, but it's not right now. The Nirvanastakam attributed to Shankaracharya. It starts, it goes things like, I am not a man, I'm making my own thing. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not that, I'm not this. I don't remember the verses, forgive me, but what am I? I am Ciddānanda-Rūpam Shivoham. Yeah, I am the nature of consciousness and bliss. I am Shiva, I am Shiva, I am Shiva. Right, and in the next verse, I'm essentially the nature of consciousness and bliss. I am Shiva, I am Shiva, I am Shiva. Ciddānanda-Rūpam Shivoham Shivoham. So this is a very yogic, Vedantic and yogic stance that it's like I am my essential nature is consciousness and bliss. My essential nature continues to remember I'm not this, I'm not that. I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not my relationships, I'm not my desires, I'm not my aspirations, I'm not anything I can identify with, anything I can reach out to. My essential nature is consciousness, and the consciousness's essential nature is bliss. My nature is consciousness and bliss. And consciousness and bliss are not two different things, they're the same thing. So, but here it says Ciddānanda-Svarūpiṇī, right? So she whose essential nature is consciousness and bliss, right? But if my nature is consciousness and bliss, right, and her nature is consciousness and bliss, that makes some interesting theological problems, right? Right. Who exactly is consciousness and bliss? So she is consciousness and bliss itself. That's what and Svarūpa, who's her own nature, whose essential nature, who's consciousness and bliss. So we mentioned this last week. This has been my meditation the last few days, last few weeks actually. Last few years, as we started the discussions on the Kālī Sahasranāma of Isma. It goes back to Isma, this a being, right? Or even the supreme being. She is. Some say, oh, she's a goddess. We could say, oh, she's a Hindu goddess. She's a tribal goddess. She's a tantric goddess. Among some of many goddesses who's worshipped as a supreme goddess, but there's many so she's a goddess, right? You can also say she's the goddess, right? She's the supreme. She is a supreme goddess, not just a being, even a great being, even greatest amongst all beings. That's one way. Or you can say that she is the supreme. she is the supreme being, or the being. Even if you can say, oh, she's the being that's the only one. She's the only being. You can have that type of language, right? But you can also say she's beingness. She's being itself, right? And so this group of names kind of hints at both of these ways. she is the one from whom everything comes, all bliss. She's bliss. She's the one we're after. She's the one who has the highest bliss. But she is not just a conscious being. She's conscious. She's our consciousness also. If she's the only being, I am one. What that verse in the what's the verse? You remember it? I don't remember it. I am one. Let me be many. What's you remember the Sanskrit? Echo hum, something like that, right? Anyway, that's a famous verse which everybody should memorize. Me first. As a good Hindu should know this verse. That I am one. It's on the Rig Veda, right? I am one that may be many. It's quoted a lot, right? A beautiful verse. I am one that may be many. So if she's one and she's become many, right? And she's consciousness, and now she seems, and we seem to be conscious. We're the many that she's become. We're part of the many she's become. And her quality is consciousness, and we seem to be conscious, right? So whose consciousness is it? It's not like, oh, that means I'm the Devi, right? In a certain sense, it means that, but doesn't really mean that. If you say that, you'd be totally wrong, right? Right. But you wouldn't be wrong at all. It's a dangerous thing to say because we would misunderstand. The problem is we misunderstand this, right? At our essential nature, you say, oh, our essential nature, I'm consciousness and bliss. And she is consciousness and bliss itself, right? So we always say, we've many times in the devotional tradition, and the Bhagavatam especially, that's why we started all these years talking in the Bhagavatam to kind of illustrate or the foundational understanding of a theistic non-duality in a certain sense, is that it's not that I am God, right? It's that God has become everybody. God has become everything, right? There's only one of our friends, Krishna Mohan, says there's only one person here, right? And he's looking through, or we would say she or he or they or it or that, right? Is looking through all eyes, and it's the one speaking and it's the one listening, right? It's not like it's not you, right? It's the one playing as you. And so I remember a very good thing that I have not forgotten, after even in my old age and as years pass by, of our Guruji's statement. He says, I shall tell you also. I may have to turn off take the microphone, but this is true secret tantric and Vedantic knowledge. This is secret knowledge, right? He says, it is forward. That's very dramatic, He says that, but I shall say it openly, and now it's time to, the things that were once hidden shall be said openly. He says, that unseen power, and that was my Guruji's kind of language for the Supreme, right? That unseen power, right, is plain as the individual soul. This was his secret, right? That somehow or another, that one Supreme Being is playing all the parts. It's playing as if individuals, as if us, or as us, however you want to think of it. Every different school of thought would interpret the saying in their own way, and attach things that they would hold to it. So Ciddānanda-Svarūpā, here Ciddānanda-Svarūpiṇī, right? She who is the essential nature. But the Rūpiṇī is interesting. It's definitely feminine. So she whose essential nature is conscious and bliss. So not only she's conscious and bliss, she's blissful and conscious, but she's consciousness itself, our consciousness, every consciousness. So we can find her that way. So the next name, Ciddānanda-Svarūpiṇī. Then Sarvānanda-Mayī, Sarvānanda. So Sarvānanda, she who is, how do you say Sarva? Sarva means all, right? So you could say, it's actually not, maybe actually if there's a Sanskrit scholar, there may be an exact, by the wording, maybe an exact way how one idea points to another. But from the commentaries I know and the tradition used to use, I'll just say it like this. Sarvananda could mean that she's she's all bliss, right? So that we can imagine, I can just off the top of my head can think of like 4 ways to interpret that. Like you can say like everywhere you see bliss, that's her, right? Or she's a combination of all types of bliss combined is her, right? She is the bliss of all, right? Or she's everywhere as bliss. You can describe it like this. So we can think of we'll think of it like with the great saint Anandamayi Ma, right? Her name is, you just add Sarvānanda-Mayī. That's the same term, right? So so when we say, oh, Ananda-Mayī, we usually translate as the blissful mother, right? She is blissful, Ananda-Mayī. And so there's a song Sri Ramakrishna would sing where Ma is described as Ichcha-Mayī. We sing that song. Ichcha-Mayī taratumi. Chakolito Mariche, that's the theme song of Kālī Mandir, great Sama Sangeet. Sri Ramakrishna would sing that she who is Ichcha-Mayī means she who is, and so we translate as she's willful, Ichcha, right? So she's blissful, she's willful, but then it gets kind of weird with like when she's Brahma-Mayī. We've discussed this before also, but so she's Brahmanful, or that's a weird, it loses its directional meaning. So then she who is full of Brahman. Okay, we can say, you can say a saint is full of Brahman, perhaps, right? Kant is full of Brahman, but you wouldn't say that about like Brahman, like about God, and God is Brahma-Mayī, right? So sometimes even this Brahma-Mayī could be, it's full of something, but it also is also the thing itself. You can also, it's in use like that. So when you say Ichcha-Mayī, she's willful, she has her own opinion, she does what she wants, but she's all will also. She's everyone's will. So here, Sarvānanda-Mayī could be interpreted this way also. She's bliss, complete bliss. Another word, sarva could also mean complete, right? So not just everywhere, everyone, all, and complete. And also, by its use also, could also mean, by extension, highest. Just as parama and sarva could also be the highest possible, the greatest, the most full, the highest among. So we say also sarva. We have so many sarva names, right? Sarva mangala mangalye shive sarvartha sadike. We say in the Chandi, right? Sarva mangala mangalye. In our very early translations, in our puja books and things like that, we translated sarva mangala mangalye. Most blissful amongst all us. Most auspicious, Sarva Mangala means auspicious, most auspicious amongst all auspicious beings, right? Sarva Mangala, Mangalye. So amongst all auspicious beings, she's the most auspicious. So you could say it like that. But actually we've changed the translation, I think, in the latest versions of the Kālī Puja book. I don't know if they haven't, they should have been changed. They haven't been changed. And I think it's probably a little more accurate, and in discussing with some scholars, that she's the auspiciousness of all auspicious beings. Right, we see auspiciousness everywhere. I mean, not every, but many, wherever you see auspicious, she is that auspicious. Not just the most, but everywhere you see auspiciousness, the auspiciousness, she is that auspicious. So everywhere you see bliss, or happiness, or pleasure, or satisfaction, or in whatever, however you interpret this term bliss, right? She is, wherever there's bliss, she is that bliss. She is bliss. She is the most blissful. And she is, wherever you see bliss, she is that bliss. Sarvānanda-Mayī. Another, by saying that Sarva Mangala Mangale, she's, wherever there's auspiciousness, she is that auspiciousness, you could also understand that wherever there's auspiciousness, it comes from her, right? So Sarva could also by extension, could mean that it's the source. So wherever you see she is the source. By saying Sarvananda, she is the source of all bliss, is one way to interpret this name also. And so we say Sarvānanda-Rūpā, Sarvānanda-Mayī, and then there's two names later, it says Sarvānanda-Svarūpiṇī. So we already discussed what Svarūpiṇī, whose essential nature is all bliss, everywhere bliss, like this. Then it just, but there's a name stuck in the middle of this, right? And it definitely breaks the flavor in certain senses. Paramānanda, Ciddānanda, Sarvānanda-Rūpā, Sarvānanda-Mayī, Sarvānanda-Svarūpiṇī, all these type of ways. And the words, it just says Nitya. Nitya means eternal, right? So it's interesting. So that would have to, I think this has to, the fact that it's, it could just be because they needed a word to fit, and they put it, this fit the meter. They had all these beautiful names, and the author needed a name that fit. And I think you mentioned that Nitya has already been mentioned, I think once at least. It's a double name. But I think let's assume that this has very profound meaning. There's no accidental meanings in this text. and I think that's probably true. Nitya is giving indication about Sarvānanda, Paramānanda, Ciddānanda, right? And so Nitya has a bunch of meanings. In our previous time we discussed this name, we've discussed them. Nitya, one of the thing about Nitya is that that's everlasting, something that lasts forever or a long time, right? That could be Nitya, right? So you can see like another Nitya could be is that which is done regularly. It's another thing. Like we have this term Nitya karma or Nitya puja. Like we do puja every single. This is called the Nitya puja. This is done every day. Nitya karma are the things, your spiritual practices as well as other dharmic society practices that you're expected to do every day. Something simple as like bathing, brushing your teeth, and in spiritual life doing your japa, chanting your gayatri, offering water to this, whatever the daily rituals for the old rabbinical time. People do havan every single day. Whatever the puja they're expected to be done daily. In Vedic culture, it's the Nitya karmas are very stringent. What's expected of you is to be done. To do them there's no have to be careful how I say that. It's not exactly I can't say there's no benefit. There's tremendous benefit to doing Nitya karmas, right? But there's no punya. There's no merit because you're expected. Your bare minimum, like the bare minimum of the human being, you have to brush your teeth, you have to eat, you have to be nice. You have to, if you're a parent, of course, you have to feed and bathe your children, take care of your children. That's expected, right? So to not do that, you'd be arrested, right? Most likely, or have your kids, something would happen if you can't do it or not doing it, you'd be judged by it, as sin, right? To do your Nitya karmas is not merito. It's human. It's just human behavior. Right. To do extra is merit. So when one is initiated into a mantra and the Guru says chant this 100 times in the morning, 100 times in the evening, or or whatever it is, right? So that is, we know it's a tremendous benefit to that. But to not do that is sin. You're disobeying what you agreed to do it. To do more than that, you get more benefit, right? So the Nitya karma is what you do. Also, that's one of the uses of Nitya. I'm just, because the name is here, so we're describing, I think it's interesting. Nitya means that which is done daily. And so we do daily puja. To not do daily puja would be we've never not done the daily puja in 26 years, We've come close, right? There was a time we didn't have enough priests and enough people, so I remember one time we were in San Diego for a program, and, we were rushing back because it was like we do a morning puja, but at that time we had to do puja before midnight. We started the first month at like 5 minutes before midnight to do the daily puja. It should have been done in the morning, but we got it done. Right now we have a little more temple standards, and the Nitya puja, part of Nitya puja is like the morning puja or the evening arati. These are daily things, or daily japa, daily prana, whatever, daily asana, whatever our daily practices are, Nitya. So there's another name for Nitya. Nitya means that which is done regularly, all the time done. Compared to occasional or festival times or extra things. But so Nitya could be that. It could mean, like I said, it could mean that everlasting. Like we sometimes think, I want to living forever, right? It is like I remember somebody coming to our door. There's a little book that you want to live forever on paradise on earth, right? I don't know. That's a very deep question. I don't want to commit right now. The book the picture didn't look attractive to me. I didn't want to live in that forever. If that's forever, I didn't know. I mean, I think perhaps they meant that something, a deeper meaning could be interpreted for the forever, right? But it's like my sister was more direct. I remember. I won't tell you. She was more blunt than I was. But I'm not sure. It's like I live for. It's like, well, this is nice, but living forever to keep this going doesn't seem. I'm not sure if that's better. It's very, very nice music. We shall shame you later. Not now. Not on camera. But you have the best ring ever. It's very nice. Very nice. Nice bhajan. No. So another meaning of Nitya, and I think it's what has to be meant here, right? And this is usually how we mean it with Nityananda. We use that word, It doesn't just mean like daily ananda, right? Nityananda means so eternal does not just mean everlasting. It doesn't mean daily or regular, right? Here it means that which is, so it's nitya, eternal, as opposed to temporal, right? As contrasted to temporal. You can use that language, right? And temporal is within the flow of time, right? And nitya is outside the flow of time. The eternal is not something that happens to be now and goes on forever or for a long time, right? It's that which time does not exist. It's beyond time. Back to this pada word. Pada means it, which is something other than time. Nitya is other than time. And so even the word like Sanatana, we use that term, or the eternal Dharma, the Sanatana Dharma, or Sanatana. So that also has both meaning, one, that it lasts a long time, right? Or it means it's independent of time. It doesn't change as per the yuga, as per the situation, right? So Nitya here means it, which is beyond time, right? So in the image of Ma, we go back to Ma's wonderful and deeply symbolic iconography also. So this is one way, of course, there's many ways to interpret, but this is one, I think, very engaging way of understanding or thinking about her image, her iconography. You have Shiva is just lying in bliss, in pure white, right, unconscious, seemingly like a corpse, right, but not like a corpse. He's fully awake, right? And Ma is standing on him, right, with 1 foot forward, or walking on him, manifesting Shiva in this thing. So she's this world of, and what is she becomes through vibration, and through the represented by the letters, represented by her mala of severed heads, and she becomes a world of duality or of multiplicity by having sword and severed head and blessings, the full array from birth to death and good and bad and pleasure and pain and the whole world duality, right? So, and within that, you could say, there's some things in that world of duality, in the world of variety, that are really nice, right? Like, there's things of great happiness and pleasure and satisfaction and success and like that. On the other side, there's also death and sickness and disease and war and temporariness and just the full gamut of life. It's a full thing, right? So, but she's manifesting all those things, and Shiva is just in the bliss of consciousness. So in this way of interpreting the symbol, Shiva represents the Nitya. He's the eternal awareness, eternal consciousness, the eternal ground of being itself, right? And she is that being's expression. I am one, let me become many. This is the expression of that sentiment, right? And when she becomes many, she becomes the many, right? And so there's perhaps we can think of spiritual practice, spiritual life, contemplation like this, to be trying to see that we're told that Shiva and Shakti are not different, that Brahman and Kālī are not different, that the universal or the ground or of awareness is in one sense not different. It's become everything, or not different than the world of duality. In Buddha says samsara equals nirvana or something like that. They use that language, right? They equate it, that in one level they're not different at that particular level. So we're called perhaps to see the eternal in the changing, to find the eternal. Swami Ramdas, a great saint of South India, he, in one of his small pamphlets that I got, he had a great image of Kālī, like the ocean and the wave, right? Shiva is the ocean, Kālī is the wave. That's just a very simple, overly simplistic, but I think it's still a powerful thing, right? You have the ocean doesn't change in a certain sense, right? It does. The changing ocean is the waves. It's constantly changing. The ocean is constantly changing, but the ocean as such doesn't change. Even its quality of constantly changing doesn't change, right? That's the mysterious Kālī Brahman dichotomy, right? So perhaps that Ciddānanda-Svarūpiṇī, Sarvānanda-Rūpā, Sarvānanda-Svarūpiṇī, Paramānanda-Rūpā, these names is of the highest bliss, is a transcendental bliss, consciousness and bliss, she who's such a like. These may be describing, and of course I think have to be describing, the nature of the Nitya, right? That we're trying to find the Nitya, And the problem is we look for the Nitya we look for the unchanging, like Guruji said, we look for the unchanging and the changing, right? And of course, in Tantra, we have to do that because we only know the changing, really, right? And in a certain sense, but we still, I think that Sri Ramakrishna, many places said, maybe you've read such a statement, that in the beginning, one thinks this world is false, and Brahman alone is real, or God alone is real, if you want to see atheistic language like that. So it's interesting. He's not exactly giving instruction; he's giving description. In the beginning, he's describing different stages, so not telling us you should walk around and think the world is unreal. But in a certain sense, we have to think that because what we're looking at, we can say, the world is temporary, the world and not eternal. It is changing, not unchanging. It is gross, not subtle. It is observed, not the observer. You can make all those distinctions, right? And what we're trying to do is find the unchanging, the eternal, the observer, the subtle, right? And so there's a spiritual, as part of spiritual practice, a stage of sadhana, one tries to find the unchanged, one tries to find the ground of being, and not get lost in the expression of being, right? But then Sri Ramakrishna said, but higher than that, right? He is one then realizes after realization, after attainment, right? One then understands that Brahman, the ground of being, that the one reality, has become everything, has become all this. And he even says like the 24 principles in Sankhya. Earth, fire, water, ether, the mind, intellect, all the senses, it's become everything, the whole world of name and form, including us. It's become everything. Now, we got the cliff notes. We've read ahead, right? And so we know what we may still be at the stage of trying to find the eternal, right? But we also know we're lucky, or maybe we're in danger by knowing to, and therefore skipping the section of trying to find the eternal and saying, oh, this manifested world is the eternal. That's true. And so I remember one Swami he told me, his name is Shankaracharya Swami, a tantric Siddha, and he says that actually it's helpful if your philosophy happens to be true. Right? That was his statement. Right? Philosophy isn't realization, and once you realize, you have to realize, right? But it's also, if your worldview happens to be true, like we should know this world is the Divine Mother's body. This world is her expression. We should start with that. But we can't get ahead of ourselves in realization. We can't just since this world is Brahman, then I just enjoy the world, right? The saint says like that, but he's found the eternal. He sees the eternal in the manifest, right? In the change, he sees the unchanging, the changing. He sees the one plane as individual soul. All that type of language. So we have to be a little careful and not. Anyways, you see, but yeah, Sri Ramakrishna's he said this many times. In the beginning, one sees this world as unreal, and Brahman alone is real. But then one comes to understand after realization that that Brahman has become everything, and this world is nothing but Brahman or nothing but Ma. Have you ever explained it? Another example he gives, which we've mentioned many times, one of the classic Ramakrishna metaphors or stories, is imagine trying to get to the roof of a building, right? We don't have here. If you get onto the roof, you'd fall off. You have to jump. Put a ladder up. But then you have steps to go, and you live on the roof of the building, right? The roof of a building is part of the house. We spend more time at our ashram and Allah, about 90% of the time we spend on the roof. Looking down at people passing by and combing, washing. Life on the roof is a big part of the life, right? But if the goal is to get to the roof, right, then one has to think, oh, the ground floor isn't the roof. It's different than the roof, right? Experience in every way, it seems to be. It's like exact opposite. There can't be more different in realities between floor and roof. In that category, they're the exact opposites. And to think they're the same is to just sit on the floor and never see the roof. To sit on the floor and say, oh, I'm on the roof, it's the same. Right? It's true. In one sense, we may find out that it's the same, right? But we don't know that yet, right? So when they think, then we have to think, there's a staircase, so I have to go to the first step. So, now I'm on the roof, right? I heard in the scriptures that the roof is made of bricks, and now I'm on a brick, so this is the roof. There's no real difference. It's fine. I'm fine here, right? You're fine there. It's true. Which is all these things are true, but you're not on. You don't get the view on the first step you do on the roof, right? So you have to think, oh, this is not the roof, because one of the definitions of the roof, there's no steps above it, right? So you can't, and it has a big vista. We have some idea what a roof means, right? And so this, whatever our experience, the ground is not the roof. The first step is not the roof. The second step is not the roof. The third step is not the roof, right? And then finally we get to voila, as one of our recently, anyway, we get to the roof, right? I won't tell you. There's a background to all these little things, but voila, we're on the roof, right? And what do we see? Oh, wow, we made it to the roof. Then we're like, what's the roof made out of? It's made of brick, right, and cement, and lime dust, and the different things that you make, how you make bricks and mortar in India, here too, right? And you realize, oh, it's actually the same as the stairs, right? They're actually no difference, but you don't know that till you got to the top, right? And then you can choose to walk back down, right? And then but you walk back down with knowledge of the roof, right? And knowledge and realization, what's Ramakrishna the term vijnana, not just jnana. Jnana is knowing the difference between roof and brick, or roof and floor, or roof and stair. But vijnana is actually, then you really know, you bring down the knowledge, but at your peak experience, whatever the roof experience. Of course, we're stretching the metaphor a little bit, but that's what we do. It's our job description. I got to spread these things over an hour. The name is Paramānanda. I've talked for an hour and a half now. So we're stretching it. Stretching the metaphor or expanding the metaphor. But when you come back down, you're bringing that knowledge down, right? And then you not just believe it and not just read it and not just affirm it, which these are all good things to do, but now you have experience. You've gone through the sadhana to see this is not the roof, this is the chain. So maybe a better language, maybe a more careful language, not going, oh, the world, Brahman is real and the world's unreal. You could say Brahman is unchanging at one aspect, and the world is another aspect, problem as changing, and I need to find the unchanging, and therefore I have to seek the unchanging, even in the change. Something like, we could change the language where it's not an anti-world type of thing, right? Vedanta tends to be just whatever isn't Brahman is rejected, absolutely, but that denies our experience, and according to Sri Ramakrishna, denies the highest experience. This is the highest experience, not just, now the word highest here is not just the peak experience, like the roof experience with the vista and the aha moment, right? But the deeper aha moment of maturity and integration, when you realize, oh, the whole time this was non-different, and you bring, and even if you come back down off the steps, you don't lose the knowledge that you gain at the peak type of experience, right? If so to use my Guruji's language, remembering, he would say, there's only one video of him alive, unfortunately. We were foolish enough, and this is before iPhones, but we only took one video of him. And in one of the places he says, he's explaining his own sadhana, right? Because his Guru told him, his Guru was very strict, and his Guru was very loving, but he was very scared to disappoint him. He practiced under his guidance, and he said, I didn't want to disappoint him, so I practiced night and day. And he was like, very much this by yogic practice and metaphysical meditation and Vedantic inquiry and the Tapasya practice. And then he said, then the way he describes it, then the mind entered the silence. That's his language, right? And he says that, and he says, but this is the significance of spiritual realization. He says, entering a fool. Right, this is the language. Yeah, one comes out being wise. Right, there's the peak. So it's like the philosophy may be his philosophy didn't change, but he was a fool that he came out, or a normal person. I mean, he wasn't a fool, but the language in comparison, he came out being wise. He came out with new knowledge, new realization. Right. So we need to find the quality of the Sarvānanda-Svarūpiṇī, Sarupa, the Ananda, Ciddānanda-Svarūpa, Paramānanda-Rūpā, right? These are descriptions of the Nitya, the eternal. Interesting that so many of the symbolism and practices in Tantra and Vedanta and in Hindu iconography is to show how the eternal is shining through the temporal, right? And even there's maybe you've seen this old, and it hasn't been on in many years, the old Joseph Campbell videos, The Power of Myth. Those very old. He in one point, this is the big theme on him: the difference between the flow of time and the eternal shining through time. That's a big theme that he sees through the mythological symbols, and he believes Kālī itself is the symbol, that how the eternal shine through the symbols of time. But then he goes into Kālī is a fierce form of Ma, not here. She's so beautiful, but she's interpreted as a fierce form of God. But there's some forms that are very fierce. And in Tibetan Buddhism, you have these beautiful Buddhas, and then you have these seemingly monstrous Buddhas, right? And of course, the Buddhists themselves give their own interpretation of what these mean. But him as a cultural comparative mythologist, he tries to see a meaning throughout traditions. He says one of the things is that you can't get caught on the image, even the beautiful image of the deity. We're taught and we meditate upon the image, but at a certain point the image shows a form that you can't hold, you can't take, and that breaks you through ideally, so that a profound experience of the eternal break through nama and rupa, name and form. Interesting. It's a big theme in his. So it is 9. We're actually not so bad. We have any? We did good. Got through basically this section. I'll recite the verse and then we can see if there's any discussion or questions. Paramānandarūpā cha. Oh, I forgot to mention cha. Cha means and. Cha. So, Ma is, one of her names is and. No, we put and because actually the cha in we're obviously now I'm stretching it even further. We'll discuss cha. In Sanskrit grammar, when in a sentence, when you have we use like a word comma and like that. So the and, the comma is showing that the and is repeated. This and this and this in a list, right? Either through commas or semicolons like that. You can make a list, and that the and is spread, right? So similarly, the cha is spread. So each name you can imagine a cha in between it, and due to meter, when you're creating these verses, sometimes the meter doesn't fit, so you add cha to fit it in, right? It also happens in Gayatri mantras, Katyayanaya Chadimahi, because Gayatri mantra requires 24 syllables, and without cha, you get 23 syllables, right? So sometimes they add it. Sometimes some Gayatri mantras will add cha somewhere because it has to match the meter count. Little detail we're mentioning over tea, remembering over tea that the Lita Sahasranāma doesn't have any chas, right? And that's because it said it was composed by the goddesses of speech themselves, the Vak Devis. So they didn't make a single mistake. There's no repetition. This already has used the word Nitya twice, right? And there's no chas. I mean, it's like actually inconceivable. You can create 1,000 names and so many 180 something verses. Perfect. I mean, by meter, perfect also. So it said that the Saraswati and the Vak Devatas themselves composed this hymn. Paramānandarūpā cha Ciddānanda-Svarūpiṇī Sarvānanda-Mayī Nityam Sarvānanda-Svarūpiṇī. Any comments or questions? Points? Yes, Ananda.
As per the Shastra, is it true that one has to be born as a human being to attain liberation or moksha? In other words, in no other heavenly realm, I'm not talking about spirituality.
So some texts will say such things, right? But I would also say that these texts are written by humans, right? And so humans will automatically, put themselves in a unique position right? But also you can see, like, of course, the gods are above humans, and the statement is only human. Even in the divine realms, the gods cannot attain realization. So the idea from this comes is that in the hellish realms, in the hellish realms below the earthly realms, and the heavenly realms above the earthly realm, beyond the human realms, as well as other species, right? This is the general view, a common view. I can't say a general view. It's a common view that everyone is simply experiencing the result of their past karmas, right? So according to your karmas of a previous life or previous lives, those fructifying are creating the body. Now, it's also true of humans. We are, as soon as you want to know what your past karmas are, here we are. This is your past karmas firing, at least some of them, perhaps a tiny bit of them, right, are firing as a human. But it's the idea is that in no other species can we generate new karmas. Can we change our karmas? Can we have a certain type of free will that's unique, right? I would also hold that we have no idea if this is true of the animal kingdom and of Gandharvas and Devas and Apsaras and Kinnadas, and like I could only, texts say things like this, but there's no way to test that, right? And there's no way to test. From our perspective, it doesn't seem, at least until very recently, it didn't seem that animals had that type of consciousness. I think that's being challenged now. I think the type of consciousness animals may have may not be that as different. There's a difference in neurology and in brain size like that, but that's true between different types of humans too, right? So it's being challenged now. So I think that's. But the ancient world would see that animals are simply are acting out their nature, and there's no free will involved, right? And therefore they cannot attain anything except what their previous karma. And the gods also, and the other worlds, are the results of their karma. Like a god enjoys its position as god due to its past karmas. And as soon as that the karma pal is finished, then again they're born again as human beings. Maybe I'm just saying all the texts don't say that. Some texts say that. Popular texts say that. So I'm not. One second, I'll finish my point. And what you tell me? Okay. Because maybe the yeah. You try to remember. I'll also try to. The thing is, I won't remember. I have to maybe another last sip of tea. But there's also, but that said, there's verses in the scriptures where, like, there's rishis in the Deva world. Narada is Deva Rishi. So you could say, oh, he attained that realm by his karma as a human being, and there's statements like that too, right? But there could also be that in other that we don't know. I mean, we can't even imagine. We know nothing about those realms except what's told in the scriptures, right? So we have to. There's no way for us to test that. We have to believe what the scripture says, right? But not all scriptures 100% agreeing. The other texts will say other things like that. As far as animals, it seems, right? There are not many examples. There's examples of animals attaining liberation as per the descriptions of saints. The famous Lakshmi the cow or Ramana Maharishi. They're the puppy of Lord Chaitanya. There's all these different things like that. But it seems also that this was the result of the grace of a saint. The company was a saint, that being in the company, and you can see, maybe you've experienced with your own pets, right? If you have an intimate pet, whatever your pet's base consciousness, it by association, it takes on it takes on similar patterns and reactions that even personality traits as you. Right, so maybe this is true of saints also when they're in the company of saints, that by their grace or that's my only hope. We hang around saints and sadhus and great devotees, so hopefully that we can take on some of their qualities and and be able to attain something by their grace or by their example or by their company. So it could be that animals are in that condition, but I don't know. There's I've met some sadhus who would, one Saint Swami Bhajanananda now passed away. He's a Swiss sadhu who walked to India like 70 years ago or 60 years ago from Switzerland, right? And never left. Very, very wonderful. But he was saying one time, he was saying, I overheard two dogs talking on the street today. Obviously he was joking. He was setting up a story. He said, and one of them said, if you don't behave yourself, you're going to be born as a human. So it's all about perspective, because humans are horrible. No dog behaves like a human. No dog can behave with such ingratitude as humans. But maybe that's it. Maybe that the fact that we can behave with such ingratitude shows that we have so much freedom, we can even break what no other species will do, bite the hand that feeds us and things like this, right? And one time he made a comment that was like, somebody said, "Oh, he's a dog." He's not a dog. No dog behaves this way. Only people can behave so badly. So this dog is a person. So it's interesting. Maybe that's a sign. Maybe that type of independence and freedom is required to break through our bonds and attain. But I don't know. But it's definitely from a human perspective. Nobody asked the gods. Nobody asked the dogs, and nobody asked the gods what they think. But the statement. But I think one of the reasons those verses are there. I do know there's a inspirational point is to take this human birth seriously. Right, because that in the Viveka Chudamani, in opening verses, there's a verse attributed to Shankara. He says that that three things. Maybe many of you know this verse and heard me say it before. Three things are very rare, right? And one is a human body, right? You see, if this idea that only in a human body can we or most likely only in the human body, from our perspective, can we attain liberation in this. And you see, in this world, all the living entities, how many are humans? There's very few. So the fact that we happen to be human is a big deal. Even in this room, there's 20 of us or something here, but there's 10 billion living entities in this room, right? And we're just a few. Even in our body, we have millions of living entities. And cells and bacteria and skin mites and all kinds of stuff. We start moving stuff around, we may find some more. We clean a lot, but you never know, right? But think how many humans. So actually, it says so. Human, and Shankaracharya goes into a great deal how rare it is to get a human body, right? He goes into using old Vedic between death and birth of human body. How rare, how it may take 10,000 years, according to the old way of understanding. It's not our modern way of reincarnating. Now we think if we die, immediately we'll be reborn. But this is a very new idea. Before, even to take on the next body, we'd have to go through so many things, come down as rain, be eaten by an animal, all this type of thing, to eventually be born in the human body. This is an old classical understanding. A more like Puranic understanding, there's 8 million species before. We have to go through 8 million species to get to the human body. Right, and then go through 400,000 species of varieties of human being in order to get the experiences necessary, mature experiences to take spiritual life seriously. So human body is very rare, but then that 400,000 species is important too, because out of all humans, how many have interest in spiritual life? So that's the second great thing: human body, right, and then a desire for liberation, mumukshu. Right, and you see I'm assuming all of us here have some interest in spiritual things, but there's many reasons to come to Ma. Not always liberation is not the only goal of religion, right? So, but Shankaracharya says that to have desire for liberation, desire for God experience, however you want to understand it, right? That is also very rare. Most humans don't have that, even though religion is a very common experience in humans. But a desire for that type of liberation, we consider that highest Param Gati, the highest possible goal, it seems to be rare, right? And so we all have human bodies, and we all have some, if not extreme, desire for liberation, for God experience, right? And then the third thing is Mahapurusha Sangha. I may be getting the verse wrong, but the company of a great soul, of the saints, right? Because all of those, you can see, there's a few. Not many people, not many living things are humans. Not many humans are interested in liberation. And those who are, it's very hard to get holy company, to get company of saints, right? Of a great soul, to those who are liberated or liberating, who have the power to help us be liberated, right? So if you have these three, Shankaracharya says, these are the three most precious things. If you have these three, do not misuse this life, because all three of them can change now. Right, it's like we can lose holy company very easily by some mistake or by somebody's death. It's gone, or by some offense or something like that. We can lose interest. We have no idea. Right now we're interested. Tomorrow we don't know what our interest is going to be. Right now, God's our first thought. Tomorrow, He may be the second thought, and then that's okay. That's better than we're still thinking of God, but that's not the strong liberation. And if you can have a car accident, right? We don't know what's going from one minute to another. Your body could change, and this human life is finished. We no guarantee, no knowledge what the next life is going to be, right? So in that sense, the human form of life is considered very, very important. If we have a human body, we have desire for liberation, we have holy company. We should utilize this life for sadhana and spiritual practice, not waste it. There's no guarantee what the next second, the next year, what tomorrow, what next year will bring, right? Or the next life will bring. We don't know what our next life's going to be, right? Or when our next life's going to be, right? But another thing, it also says that trying to show the value of the human body, it says that devas are pining to take birth as human body in human form. Now, it's interesting to think because other texts say that nothing worse for a deva to be born. You curse it when a deva messes up; it gets cursed to be born as a human, right? But I think that's a different bhava. This bhava is that because in human form, I could practice. I'm not just experiencing the result of past karma. I can do new karmas and break free from the cycle of karma itself. Anyway, you remember your point, or?
Kind of, but I think we've already kind
Okay.
of
That was
covered
mine.
it because I was thinking the Jataka tales and other
Yeah.
stories that cobras are fallen yogis.
Yeah.
That animals do.
Yeah.
At least by
So this is interesting. The idea of cobras being fallen yogis, right? That's an interesting. That what I mentioned with Swami Bhajanananda when he said, "Oh, he's not a dog. No dog behaves with such ingratitude," right? He says he's actually a yogi, and I think he believed in his previous life he was a disciple or something, right? And therefore, it's the guru's job to liberate his disciple no matter what condition, right? If the disciple goes to hell, the guru goes to hell, right? To save him, the guru has to. There's a deal. Right, right. So he took care of this animal that behaved literally, he'd be feeding him and the dog would be biting him. There's no dog. Of course, it could just be a traumatized street dog. We can imagine psychological reasons why a dog would bite the hand that feeds them, right, and be such ingratitude by trauma or something like that. But this dog, I think, was not by trauma. It was badly behaved dog, a dog behaving not like a dog, But this idea that sometimes we move from species to species. This view, but it's not considered common to go back to of course this is the lower higher is from the human. Like I said, those two dogs that he overheard talking didn't agree with this view, right? Of going to a lower or different non-human species of life. Is usually the result of some, popular Hindus due to some mistake, some sin, some transgression, and or to learn a lesson sometimes, or to suffer the results of some karma, when one is like this, right? There's a statement in the scriptures that anyone who dies in Vrindavan will attain liberation, will attain the highest goal, right? But there's also thieves in Vrindavan. There's murderers in Vrindavan. There's cheats in Vrindavan. Will they attain? Right. So then they've modified the story. Oh, they'll become monkeys and dogs in Vrindavan. Right. And then they'll live their life. They'll satisfy that karma for behaving properly, misbehaving, and then they'll attain maybe from the monkey life. There's no way to prove these type of things. But this is the how you take this idea and how do you make it sense? How do you make sense of it? But sometimes you see animals that behave. We have experiences like this of animals that seemed, they seem to have different qualities than most other animals. And who knows? We can then imagine, oh, there's some yogi or some. I am in Amarkantak. I was having tea outside the temple with one young Swami, recently sannyasi. And we were under this big, beautiful banyan tree. That banyan tree has been 700 years like that. But I remember he was to me, he says, I wonder which yogi is living in that tree. Right? That tree can't be a regular. No tree. That tree can't just be a tree. Of course, it could just be a great tree. Trees may be the most enlightened things out there. They don't have to have another life, right? But who knows? Maybe it was a yogi who desired to be a tree on this holy place. Or maybe a yogi messed up and was born as a tree. and will live, because we have that story in the Bhagavatam also, where the trees, some yogi got cursed to be a tree, but by being in a holy place, being in the company of Krishna, or being in this story, in the presence of the Narmada Kund, and so many sadhus and things like that, then maybe it will, after its long and glorious life, learning its lesson as a tree, holy company, can attain liberation. Who knows? Any other? It's a good, interesting topic for sure. Oh, what time is it now? It is now 6:28. So I have exactly 2 minutes. Any last question I can give? I can answer in 1.5 minutes. Okay, thank you for your kind attention. We shall continue, God willing, next week.
So we're in a new group of names next.
Yes, so I'll just